Greetings Helldivers, FiOth here, and today I wanna talk about a weapon that is kinda off meta in a game that is dominated by a very strict one. I will be talking to you about the spear, the anti-tank heavy hitter that very few people seem to be using because the railgun exists. The railgun and the breaker seem to be the two go-to weapons right now, and that is totally understandable because they are so overtuned, the rest of the stuff is left in the dust. The problem with Helldivers 2 at the moment is not that it has two really good guns, is that many of the other guns for some reason are lacking. And that becomes painfully obvious when you try to use them on tier 7 and upwards. They just can't really hang. They don't offer enough in order for them to be considered useful in the majority of situations. The spear, however, is a very specific case. It is probably the hardest hitting single fire weapon you can have, but the way it's handled and the stuff you have to sacrifice in order to make the most of it make it kind of a tough call to recommend. So without further ado, let's break it down and see what makes it tick. So the FiOth 14 spear states an anti-tank homing missile which must lock on its target before launch, effective against large and armored enemies, takes 3 seconds to call in, has unlimited uses, 480 seconds of cooldown. What is not stated here from the get-go is that the spear comes in two pieces. One is the backpack and one is the cannon itself. The backpack can be worn by one of your allies so they reload you whilst you keep firing. That will speed up the firing process immensely. If you don't have an ally using the pack, you have to take a knee and reload. The process that takes a few seconds. It's not that dramatic. Most of the heavy weapons work this way, but it severely cuts down on your DPS with this thing. How do you optimize firing it? Well, the thing with spear is that it can insta-gib even a Bile Titan, but you have to be able to hit a headshot with it. You have to be positioned in a way that will make the missile fly true towards the weak spot. And contrary to public belief, enemies don't have multiple lock points. It's just the point of entry. Well, in the case of the chargers, that should be up the rectum, so point of entry is pretty accurate. That will optimize the damage. For the Bile Titan, it has to go towards the head. For the charger, it has to go from behind the fleshy bit at the end of the tail. Tanks give you a bit more leeway. You can just fire and forget. In most cases, you're gonna score a devastating hit, and smaller enemies really aren't to be considered because they're not worth the ammo, and the really small ones don't even proc the lock-on. Now, the lock-on is another issue I have with this thing. It is extremely iffy, extremely hit or miss. Sometimes the enemy will be at optimal range and it will refuse to lock on. Sometimes environmental conditions will make it impossible to lock on. Other times you will lock on, but the enemy will move towards you and it will fly over them. And sometimes you just feel like you're optimally positioned and it still hits a leg or chitin and doesn't deal damage enough to kill the target. What's good about this? In any scenario with support fire, like let's say an orbital laser or people who know how to hit the spots that don't have chitin protection anymore, this thing deals extreme damage, nonetheless breaking armor and exposing the fleshy bits below. So you can do a lot of damage with it even if you don't kill the target outright. Sometimes that is all you need. You don't have to carry the entire fight yourself, but it would feel much better using this thing if it was easier to guarantee that it will be a one and done deal. Also, when it comes to the backpack, if someone else is carrying it, that's all fine and dandy, but if you have to carry your own backpack, you're giving up your shield. Shield is one of the most overtuned items at the moment. Will save your life a bazillion times just by being active. Stray explosions, small enemies trying to nab at you, getting charged, getting knocked left and right. The shield will absorb the blunt of the damage, keeping you alive. Pairing it with Democracy Protect on your armor, you can survive some very close calls. The problem here is that, as stated, this also requires a backpack to operate optimally. If you don't have the backpack, you only have one missile, which is preposterous, of course, because it would be a one and done weapon. You have to keep up both your auxiliary weapon, that could be a railgun as stated in the beginning, and your protective gear or your guard or grover, let's say, for a weapon that cannot guarantee an insta-kill on enemies, and you only end up carrying an additional 3 missiles. After you fire these 3 missiles, you have to be resupplied by a person with a backpack, or you don't have any more missiles to work with. You have to call it down again from the stratagem and reinitiate the whole cycle. I really like the spear. It's kind of meta, takes a bit of weight off the railgun's shoulders when it comes to what works and what doesn't, and I really enjoy insta-gibbing those pesky titans and see them go down after just 1 missile fired at them. What I don't like is the iffy lock-on and the fact that you cannot always dictate the angle at which the rocket will hit the target. Can be extremely annoying because, as I said, the reload is very punishing and it asks for too much whilst the consistency remains iffy. When it comes to the damage, I wouldn't recommend anything changes. It's awesome as it is. What I would urge the devs to do with this thing is make sure it provides a more optimal firing solution. If you are about to give up both your backpack and your auxiliary weapon, your support weapon, you might as well get something that guarantees will work, and of course fix the lock-on mechanism that is now a hit or miss situation most of the time, and whilst you might have a target in front of you at optimal range, it just refuses to cooperate. So this is it, Helldivers, my review of the spear. A very interesting but slightly glitchy and vastly overlooked heavy weapon. I urge you to give it a go. Might not be your favorite, will not dethrone the railgun anytime soon, but still it pays to keep things interesting and fresh instead of just relying on one thing over and over. Subscribe, like and share this if you found it interesting. Hit the notification bell to be notified about uploads and streams, and until next time, be well, stay frosty, and always strive for perfection. Cheers!